Thanks, Gerlach. Can you hear me, Sean?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks to all our witnesses in relation to this issue. It's a very, very important issue in relation to retention of, doctors in the public health service. I'm just going to ask some very, very, very practical questions. First of all, in regards to newly qualified doctors, how many doctors would qualify every year in Ireland? How many doctors would qualify? Students to doctors, as in I had to look at this up because I didn't actually know what an NCHD is. That's a non-consultant hospital doctor. So just for clarity.
So after they finish medical school, they would do internship, and we have about 725 intern places for Irish EU doctors. There were a few more last year due to COVID, but in general, 725 would graduate each year, and that would be the ones that have come through the CAOCS.
Okay. And that's every year. Generally, that's the mean per year. Say the last decade would be in around that.
It has increased because we introduced, I don't have this in my notes, because we introduced graduate entry medicine, I think, in 2012. So it was a lot lower. It was in around 300 until then, and it's been increasing steadily since then until now to reach the 725 mark.
Regards to that figure, 725, how many would stay in the Irish health system?
So I suppose this is where we hit a problem, because we don't actually have proper data on that. Ireland doesn't collect proper data on that. What I've been doing is looking to other countries to see how many of our doctors land there, and to try and figure out from there how many stay and how many leave. But it's quite difficult to do, and there's a real need for better data. We need to track the 725 as they exit. We need to keep an eye on them, find out whether they leave and whether they return. And at the moment, we don't generate data like that. But what I can tell you is that last year in 2021, 391 Irish doctors obtained work visas for Australia. So of those 300, about 350 were very junior doctors, so would have graduated a year or two ago. But it's quite a lot relative to the number that we train.
So there could be a circumstances where 35–40% of them newly qualified students come doctors could emigrate. That'd be possible?
Yeah, we train 725 each year, and last year 391 doctors left for Australia. And that would be probably after their intern year or during their BST. So within a couple of years of graduating, yeah, they would have moved to Australia.
So more than 50%.
You see, I don't know that it's the same doctors, so I have figures from I know how many graduate here, and I know how many landed in Australia. What we're not able to do is join those dots, and that's something that Ireland really needs to start doing. We train these doctors, they're highly skilled, highly talented, highly needed, and we have a vague idea of where they go after graduation. We need much more than a vague idea. We need to know how many leave, and if they return, when they return, and whether they return to work in the Irish health system, public system, private system. We just, we need we need that type of information.
I think it's worth reiterating as well that that's only Australia. So that, I don't know, the figure was 325, that's only Australia. So there are doctors emigrating to other primarily English-speaking countries as well. So that's just something else to consider.
Okay, sorry. And the yearly pay for a newly qualified doctor, what's the average pay for a doctor that goes into the Irish public health system?
I don't have those figures.
I don't have those figures either. I mean,
okay.
I could say I'd be guessing roughly at what it is. I know there's a general scale and it goes up fairly quickly, but I don't know what the starting rate is for the salary.
Okay. Just in relation to the medical profession, I think if you're talking about any other profession, I mean, absolutely any other profession or place, when you hear kind of stories in relation to really qualified doctors for long hours, work conditions that are extremely challenging, and the responsibility of being a doctor it's really, really kind of difficult to kind of comprehend that a doctor, a human being after all, is working sometimes over 100 hours per week. Now, this is a very, very challenging position. If it was any other job, say, for example, this is probably not a great example, but example of a truck driver. A truck driver, he or she can only drive a certain amount of hours per week. If they go over that, they're not only a danger to themselves, they're a danger to the public. Because obviously you're human beings, we can make mistakes if we're so tired and burned out in a working day or a working week. And it's incredible that, the public health system and probably private health system has allowed this to happen, where doctors are working these colossal amount of hours. And no wonder, they want to emigrate. No wonder they want to kind of are burnt out. And, I think it's ridiculous in this day and age that, people are working that amount of hours. And I'm very kind of interested in this system in Australia where there's a set amount of hours. Because if you said to a newly qualified doctor, well, look, you're not going to be working 100 hours or 80 hours per week. You're working 45 hours a week. And that, I think, would have, a good effect on keeping doctors in the Irish health system. I don't know what your opinion on that is.
I mean, I think that the doctors who are in Australia were doing the same job. I mean, they're still hospital doctors. They're still working in a health system. They're still delivering healthcare, but they're doing so in a much more sustainable way. They're working. They're working reasonable hours, 40 hours a week or thereabouts, and that frees them up to have a work-life balance. And that's something that is denied to a lot of our doctors in the Irish health system, unfortunately. I think that the working hours should be restricted in the same way that they are for truck drivers or any other worker. And they're supposed to be, under the European Working Time Directive, restricted to 48 hours a week. But very few of the hospital doctors that we spoke to are working 48 hours a week in the Irish health system. Very few.
Much more than that, obviously.
Yeah, they're working much longer hours, longer shifts. They're not taking breaks. They'd struggle to have time to go to the toilet during shifts. They would struggle to find time to drink water, eat meals. They're really not minding themselves at all because they can't, because there's just so much work for them to do and too few of them to do it. So I think it is really important to compare hospital doctors and their working conditions to other professions and to other, where this just wouldn't be acceptable. It shouldn't be acceptable for hospital doctors either, because ultimately they have to care for us. And I'm sure none of us want to pull up to the hospital knowing that the hospital doctor seeing us is exhausted and hungry and tired. I think we can do better.
Why is this allowed to happen? Why? I know. Why is this? Why is this allowed to happen? If a doctor, as I said, in a very, very responsible position, is forced to work much more than 48 hours per week. Why is it allowed to happen? That's the question. Sure, you have an answer to that. And I'm sure the doctors' union have an answer to that. But it's just it seems to this seems to kind of be continuous. And obviously, if you have this situation where doctors are burnt out, and I know obviously if you're a newly qualified doctor, you need experience. But there's experience where somebody's pushed to the limits, and if you're pushed to any human being is pushed to a limit, they can make mistakes. And they can get burned out. So why is this allowed to happen in this profession?
I don't think it should be allowed to happen in this profession or any profession, to be honest. I think in Australia, when some of the people that I interviewed in Australia had been about to quit medicine, they'd worked for a couple of years in the Irish health system, they'd burnt out and they were just about to give up, and they went to Australia and realised that they actually love being a doctor. They just don't love the conditions that come with being a doctor. And I think we need to improve their conditions so that they stay in the Irish health system and are encouraged and supported to do so in sustainable ways,
I think doctors spoke to us about,
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, doctors spoke to us about, loving their job, loving their profession, but feeling like the enemy while being in a hospital and feeling punished by their working conditions. So I think, why is this happening? We can only speak from our data. I think it's that combination of the negative aspects of the medical profession generally, but also an under-resourced organisation. And when those two come together, and also I would add the sense of professionalism that doctors have and the responsibility they have for their patients, means they will take on as much burden as they can, often at a personal cost to their lives and well-being.
And just my very final question: if the system, as in Australia, in relation to set amount of hours, was implemented in the Irish public health system, obviously that, I think, we all agree that would be a very, very good thing for doctors. But what knock-on effect would that actually have if that was implemented, in the next 6 months in the Irish public health system?
It's a very difficult question to answer. I think we have to look at how we're spending money in the Irish health system. Although we're spending a lot of money on health and a lot of money on recruitment, a lot of that is going to agency and locum staff who are more expensive. So I think you need to look at the inefficiencies in the health system and look how that could be used in better ways to better support the doctors to do their job.